Hi, my name is Chris Bennett, and I'm here with my friend Colonel Russ Barber. This is our introduction to a series of conversations we've been having over the past 2 weeks on some of the world's problems and their solutions. I've been working on this myself before I met Colonel Barber for a little over 20 years. And it's been a search for and a sort of a quest to try to understand what are the causes and cures for human interpersonal discord and the negative impact of human conflict. So I've learned a lot over those years. But most of it has come to me in the last 3 years. So it's good to be here with you.
Thank you.
Colonel Barber's been working on this type of work for much longer than I have. How long has that been?
Well, I've been a chaplain since 1941, for over 60. Over 60 years, and participated in 3 wars, and now the 4th war, a war against terrorism. I've been a minister for 70 years, and so.
All right. So my feeling is that I've always tried to learn from people who have something to offer anywhere. And so, while my background is not Christian, Colonel Barber's is, and so I never had any problem spending time with him and learning from him, even though I haven't been converted yet. But it's more like for me, it's more like an exploratory thing of just picking up and learning from all kinds of different people.
Maybe our message about Billy Graham tonight might help.
Yep. Yep, I think it will.
That's right, yeah.
So we're creating this introduction right now to sort of give an overview of the content of our discussions over the last couple weeks. And so we're going to try to rapidly go through some of the topics that are going to be covered to sort of summarize them. So the main thrust of the conversations that we've been having is to survey and discuss the research that I've come across, especially over the past 3 or 4 years. And my primary focus, I guess, has been to work on reading and understanding what people who have been dedicating their lives to these types of problems to finding the solution. And so I guess that's why I became so interested in talking to Colonel Barber, is because of his extensive experience and background working on solving world problems and helping people. So
and we're interested in every facet of life and a person's health and well-being and spiritual relationships and human relationships and helping people to find God and walk in His ways, which we find outlined in the Bible.
mm-hmm.
And through the church, which is a product of Christ's teachings, and which He established. And so it's a great walk, and we've looked at every facet of life: the physical, the psychological, the emotional, and so everybody in the world has these situations in life, and so we try to find the answers, and it's found in the teachings of God and Christ and the Holy Spirit and the Word of God, and they are conveyed primarily through the churches of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been a pleasure to work with Chris here in this project, and he's done vast research in this field and opened my eyes to a lot of the great psychologists and psychiatrists and doctors and leaders in the world, and I've opened his eyes to a lot of the spiritual leaders of the world. So
that's absolutely true. That's exactly right, and you've added and opened many new doors for me.
right, yeah.
So I definitely appreciate that. So what prompted this get-together a couple weeks ago is that I'd been reading that there's consideration right now as to whether or not what level funding we're going to receive in Los Angeles on health care from the federal government, and because of the budget crunches, they're considering some drastic cuts. And so it sort of inspired me to get together and for us to talk about that and what the impact of that might be. And how that might solve problems or make problems worse. So
I looked at this project together here. We found that in the study of the country, the health problems of the country, so many people are stressed out, and in America and around the world, we also, being a churchman myself, and the president has pointed us to the faith-based organizations in America to help solve some of these problems across the world, and to the educational system in the country, so that our children are better educated. And so we're looking at all aspects of those things and how it all ties into a person's health and well-being, and every part of his and her life in America and actually around the world. Everybody in the world needs food and clean water and better health and education, and so we're trying to address those problems and situations, and so this all ties together some way or another here, so that as people we study together here, maybe we have some solutions to offer.
definitely. So that brings up the two dimensions of what we have been talking about. One is to discuss the problems such as violence, child abuse, spousal abuse, family violence, rape, war, all of these problems. And then the other side is to talk about the solutions, whatever they are, whoever has them. We can't put on the blinders and block out certain solutions. We really have to look at all those.
Right.
So that's what my philosophy has been, and that's what Colonel Barber's philosophy has been.
That's right. Yeah.
So some of the issues we look at are violence, what are the causes, Why do the majority of Americans die from preventable illnesses, while billions are spent on treatments which don't really work all that well? Then this is also about what was America's promise to our veterans. Especially, I have a special interest, and Colonel Barber has a special experience with World War II veterans, and all veterans, really.
Right. Korean, Vietnam, and now the war against terrorism.
So let me start off with reading something here from Colonel Barber's background so you can know a little bit about him. Chaplain Barber began his military service in October 1941 with the 11th Horse Cavalry before Pearl Harbor. He was the youngest chaplain on active duty in all branches of the military
at that time.
He was one of 4 chaplains that made the D-Day landing on Omaha Beach, June 6, 1944, in Normandy in France, and spent 11 months under fire in Europe. Chaplain Barber helped to choose the site for the first U.S. cemetery overlooking Omaha Beach on D-Day. Plus, he also recalls having lunch with the G.I. Joe war correspondent Ernie Pyle on D-Day.
D plus one.
D-Day plus one.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Chaplain Barber was in the Battle of the Bulge, where he had his Jeep torn apart by a German artillery shell. He had lost another Jeep, sunk in the D-Day landing. 2 of his assistants were killed in battles in Europe. War's end found him in Czechoslovakia face to face with the Russians. Returning home at the end of 1945, he stayed with the reserve program and changed to the Air Force in 1948. Chaplain Barber served 2 years in Japan and Korea in the Korean War. For 16.5 years, he was wing chaplain of what was the largest air reserve wing in America at that time. So that's part of his background. So here's what Colonel Barber has said. War is ugly, war is hell. And he should know. Retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel George Russell Barber, 87, is a decorated veteran of 3 wars: World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. By responding to God's unique plan for his life, he succeeded in bringing the light and love of Christ into the terrible darkness of war. Barber had a front row seat for some of the bloodiest scenes in the last century. He spent D-Day on Omaha Beach in Normandy, France, as gunfire whizzed overhead. By the next morning, more than 1,500 American soldiers lay dead. He was in the famed Battle of the Bulge, where German artillery fire tore his Jeep in half. He pulled American soldiers out of the Rhine River following the collapse of the Remagen Bridge, and he held some of those men in his arms as they died. He remembers arriving at a concentration camp in Nordhausen, Germany, where he saw Nazi soldiers set fire to a building filled with 200 Jewish men. At the end of World War II, he rescued several European ministers, nuns, and priests from the Russians who had moved into Czechoslovakia. Barber's role in history is unique, though, because he volunteered to go to war as an ambassador for Christ, serving the United States military as a chaplain. He used the horrific circumstances of war as opportunities to share the love of Christ. Committed to his lifelong calling to help people to have a spiritual relationship with God, Christ, and the Holy Spirit, he ministered to thousands of soldiers. Barber remembers the frightening circumstances of war left men particularly open to God. Quote, there are no atheists in foxholes. When those men faced death, their faith was great, he says. He delivered chapel services over loudspeakers, performed baptisms, held and prayed with dying men, provided spiritual counsel to soldiers bound for the front lines, and buried fallen soldiers. Despite the unspeakable fear and pain of war, Chaplain Barber persisted in ministry, reminding his men of God's unending love and of the kingdom provided through Christ's sacrifice. Quote, "I was there as a man of God to lead men closer to God," he says. "I would give them a Bible and say, 'The reason I give this to you is so that you will find Christ.'" It's great stuff. It was the day before D-Day, and Lieutenant Colonel George Russell Barber was conducting a worship service. As soldiers of all faiths prayed, the Army Air Corps chaplain knew what his country needed to do. Quote, "Our purpose is to lead people to God," said Barber. "But when we have dictators who want to dominate the world, we have to defend the world against them." When asked how he would reconcile promoting God and waging war, Barber said, "Such conflicts are unavoidable since they are the result of evil leaders." Quote, "At points in history, wars are the only way to combat those leaders, in spite of the human losses," Barber said. "But it is ideas, too, that control the destiny of the world." Among Barber's war exploits, which included the taking of Liege, was the rescue of GIs during the collapse of Remagen Bridge in Germany.
Remagen Bridge, yeah. The Remagen Bridge, yeah.
The Nazis had destroyed the bridge to prevent Allied vehicles and personnel from crossing the Rhine. 2 soldiers, Barber said, died in his arms. Quote, "Some of the civilians we saw brought comfort and strength to the leaders," Barber said. But it wasn't until the Korean War that Barber's efforts, along with those of religious war correspondent Bob Pierce, helped spark World Relief, which provided assistance for more than 100,000 orphans in Seoul.
World Vision, yeah. World Vision, yeah.
Last year, we raised $100 million and helped 47 million people in 97 countries of the world, Barber said. He also helped organize and provide food to German soldiers after they surrendered to Allied forces. But such missions of mercy are nothing new for the clergyman who yearns for a world that is free of armed aggression. Quote, "If we can help solve the problems of hunger, poverty, and hatred in the world, then we can overcome war."
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So you've always believed that?
Right, yeah.
That's awesome. So that gets us to the a sort of a focal point of all our discussions, which is America's promise to these young men who went to hell to war for us.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Colonel Barber's card. He carries it around and he gives it out to everybody. It's one of the first things he gave me. And right here on the back it says, love, hope, food, water, health, shelter, education, peace, security, freedom for the world. International Christian Mission Foundation. So that's your,
that's right, yeah.
That's your philosophy.
That's the foundation that I formed with associates in 1966, which is a 501(c) foundation. Operates all over the world.
Great. All right. So when I saw this card, and after studying it over many, many hours over the last year and a half, I finally had the thought that this is America's promise, is to deliver these realities to the world so that we can get beyond war.
Mm-hmm.
And has that been your intention?
Right, yeah. See, you can live 2 months without food, but you can only live 7 days without water.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't live without love and kindness and mercy in life. See, also.
Mm-hmm.
And so, our aim is to teach everyone, lead everyone that we can to find these things that bring life and to everyone in the world that we can. So it's spiritual life and humanitarianism and the Word of God, the Bible, and the church, and all spiritual institutions, but also the secular institutions, you know. Business and economics builds a nation along with the spiritual values of life. See,
Mm-hmm.
everyone needs to work and to make money and to have health, better health, and find churches and understand the Word of God. And so it's been my privilege to work with the great church leaders, Norman Vincent Peale since 1937,
Mm-hmm.
and Billy Graham since 1949, the tent meeting in Los Angeles, and Bob Schuller since 1960, and so other great leaders. So Bill Bright and there's just hundreds of them, thousands of them that I work with and still work with people all over the world, as well as the janitor in the building, or the person who cleans the streets
Mm-hmm.
and empties the trash,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the doctors and the nurses and the business leaders of the nation, and all of them together. It takes all of us together, working together to make a nation, a great nation. And the political leaders to the statesmen. We need to elect statesmen in Washington. So I've been very close to Washington for the last 50 years or more. In fact, some of the leaders they said, Colonel Barber, make my office in Washington your office, and I did. See, so go to Washington and operate from the office of the congressman and senators there. So anyway, work with every president from Roosevelt on down, and so on. So in those areas where we can work together. And,
So I guess in a way you've sort of been working your whole life to fulfill on this card.
Yeah, to help
Get
the
all
people
this to the world.
help the people of the world have these attributes of life.
So we sort of met and clicked, and it's sort of been my same goals. I sort of have the same goals that I've been working on.
Mm-hmm.
So both of our research has we have been discussing our research and our findings, and we hope that our discussions can be illuminative and lead to some solutions. The first thing I want to talk about is a concept called what Colonel Barber and I would like to do in our project is help to bring the information on these problems, on their causes and their solutions to the public, the solutions that are not being explored and not being discovered.
Mm-hmm.
So to alleviate suffering. to alleviate people's suffering.
That's right.
Around the world, to alleviate our suffering.
That's right.
Because when people suffer, we all suffer.
That's right.
Isn't that right?
We're all faced with depression, and all
bad feelings,
and all kind of things that are wrong in our lives, and we need to learn how to eliminate those things and find a better life.
Mm-hmm.
And we find it in many ways, but primarily we find it through God and Christ and the Bible and the church and
Mm-hmm.
spiritual values of life, and working with those around the world who make a contribution to all of that in every field of life, see. And
so what we've been attempting to do is to tap into all of the incredible expertise
right.
around the world. The greatest minds in the world have an unusual understanding, I've found, of what's happening in our world and what the solutions are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's been our experience that when other people suffer, that we all suffer along with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because of a phenomenon which I kind of coined the label for. It's called I call it the Titanic affect. AFFECT.
Right, yeah.
And that is the feeling you get when you're watching people suffer and there are solutions around to help them and relieve that, but they're not being implemented.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same feeling that they must have had when the Titanic went down and the people were sitting there in half-empty boats watching way off in the distance their fellow passengers screaming for help.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a fear that if they went over and helped them, that they would be overwhelmed and they would drown also.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which probably would have happened, yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, which probably would have happened.
That's right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's a normal reaction, which we all have. And so it's our position that if we relieve other people's suffering, it will help them and it'll help us too. It'll uplift everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much what your life has been about, right?
Right, yeah, right, yeah, yeah. In 1943, the Dorchester was sailing in the North Atlantic and was hit by a torpedo, and it sank in 27 minutes. And over 900 men on board, and there wasn't enough life jackets for all those men. There were 4 chaplains on board, friends of mine, and just before the ship sank, why those chaplains are on the deck. They had their life jackets on, but they found 4 enlisted men that didn't have life jackets on. They took theirs off, put them on those 4 enlisted men, and those 4 chaplains locked arms and went down with the ship.
Wow.
I was in Harvard with those 4 chaplains in 1942.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
really incredible.
That's right, yeah.
So that's sort of like I guess that's one way to deal with that sort of a situation.
Mm-hmm.
So
that story is there's a book on it by Ken Wales, and the Sea of Glory is called.
Mm-hmm.
And also we are planning to, Ken Wales is a great producer, and we plan to make a movie of that situation, so to say. So,
great. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
That's right, yeah.
So I wanted to mention the idea of the Titanic effect because it seems like sometimes people forget that other people's suffering affects all of us. Has that been your experience?
Oh yes,
Colonel Barber?
actually, we all suffer together. Yeah, the whole world suffers together. All 6 billion of us. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So the people who understand that, here's an example of somebody who understands that. This is about Bob Pierce. He said, "Let my heart be broken with the things that break the heart of God."
Yeah.
A young minister, Bob Pierce, wrote these words on the flyleaf of his Bible 40 years ago. It was during the Korean War, and he was deeply moved by the suffering of the children he saw there. When he returned home, he couldn't stop thinking of those little ones. Motivated by Jesus' example of compassion and love towards children, he began recruiting friends, relatives, and acquaintances to sponsor impoverished children. That is how World Vision was born.
That's right. Yeah, I was in on all of that.
Wow.
I was a chaplain in Korea and Japan during that period of time. And Bob called me and said, "Yeah, I've got 100,000 orphan children sold Korea, 100,000." And he said, "Let's do something about it." So we notified the Masons and the churches and the Rotarians and everybody back in America. And we brought 56,000 of them to America. They were adopted by American families, raised here. But out of that whole experience grew World Vision, which is now the largest humanitarian organization in the world. And last year, in time of slowness and depression, we raised just under $1 billion in World Vision, one of that great humanitarians. And to work with those kind of organizations and all the other humanitarian organizations across the world, that's been my privilege, and the privilege of other leaders of the world too, and the medical leaders of the world, see. And so
So there was some kind of spark
right,
that
yeah.
impelled you to do something
That's
about
right,
this.
Yeah, right, yeah. Right, yeah.
So there was the feeling that you got of compassion, where you feel like a kind of like a pain
That's
you
right, yeah,
feel
right,
for these
yeah.
people.
Right, yeah.
Right. And then there's like a spark in you which says, do something about it.
That's right, yeah. And we unite the world together in alleviating the suffering and the poverty and the hunger and a war.
So I guess what this whole conversation has been about is to explore the work of Colonel Barber and these other people,
Yeah.
and perhaps uncover and the kind of like the secrets
Right, yeah.
which
Right, yeah.
create that kind of power and effort to solve these problems.
Yeah. Doctors Without Borders is another wonderful humanitarian organization. These doctors over the world go to the far-flung corners of the world and treat people, see. Samaritan's Purse does the same thing, see. Led now by, it was started by Bob Pierce after he started World Vision. And when he died, Franklin Graham, Billy Graham's son, had worked with him the last 3 years of his life. So he inherited the organization and leads that organization now, along with us, working with his father and the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, see. So, and that's, all these wonderful humanitarian and Christian and godly organizations all over the world, making a difference in the lives of the 6 billion people in our world, see.
That is amazing. Well,
Yeah, right.
I guess that our interest is that we see, with understanding that, we see a huge amount of good work being done, but at the same time the world is getting worse.
That's right.
So
We got the problem of sin.
there's something wrong here.
There's something wrong, sin.
You know, sin.
Yeah.
There's something. So my interest is in maybe cloning this man right here and his friends, and sort of maybe I feel like I found some kind of gold, some kind of power, some kind of energy source that if we explore it and try to understand it, maybe we can tap into it and make it grow.
Right. Right, yeah.
So that's what this whole conversation is about.
That's right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I guess I better start this off quickly in the beginning by saying this is a non-professional presentation, okay?
Yeah, all right.
We've done our best to put it together. It's a little rough, but it's a little long. It takes about 10 hours that's about how long we talked. But I guess 10 hours is a lot less than 87 years, right?
Right, yeah.
So what we do, I guess I'll say a little bit of.
We want to challenge the people of the world, but especially of America, that have resources, challenge them to work together, that we can eliminate all these problems of hunger and famine and homelessness and suffering, and get all the doctors and the medical teams working together, and the business teams working together, and rich and poor all working together. Colin Powell is a great friend of mine, and the Alliance for Youth program affecting the lives of 15 million young people in America. And so we've all got to work together. The business leaders of America work together, see. Rich and poor, medium class. Because the poverty-stricken, they don't have the resources to put to it, but they can bring their problems together with us, and maybe we can help them solve it, see. So get rid of stress and disappointment and anxiousness and all these things that cause bad health.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's exactly what we look at. And we look at, in this series of conversations, we look at the material that I've found especially over the last 3 or 4 years. I sort of like tapped into the gold mine. Mm-hmm. Not only with Colonel Barber, Billy Graham, Dr. Robert Schuller, but also with the best experts on health issues,
right,
on psychology, from psychiatry, the doctors from universities, our best universities around the country and around the world.
Right.
And what I found is that the overwhelming majority of the information I'm finding is not getting out to the public.
Mm-hmm.
It's not talked about.
That's right. Yeah.
So this is why we put this material together in a video format. First of all, that was the easiest way to do it, but second of all, this conversation is sort of a proposal for a team to come together to create an avenue by which all of this information can get out to the public.
That's right.
And
stimulate interest and action.
Mm-hmm.
To the people of America, especially right now, and working with all of the great organizations and groups, and it all comes down to working together with God and Christ and the Holy Spirit and the Bible and the church and business and economics and health care. And so all these, everybody in the world needs these things, you see.
So that's exactly what we are working on doing.
Right, yeah.
Colonel Barber has been working with a lot of great people, and he's accomplished many great things. And even so, I never heard about what he was talking about in my first 36 years. So it occurred to me that there's some kind of barrier to the knowledge that he has and that these other experts have, which is preventing it from getting out.
Right.
So, but we believe, it's our firm belief and conclusion that there is a group of people, a team of people who could make that happen.
Right.
And so this is sort of a starting place.
Tap into that team.
Yep.
Right, yeah.
That's what our intention is and our goal is.
Right, yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
So my approach to understanding problems has always been to seek out and use and benefit from any information I can get my hands on. I haven't really been prejudiced in that aspect. So as sort of a starting point and an overall, maybe a foundation for all of our discussions is best expressed in some quotes I have here from the Bible that Colonel Barber gave me a year and a half ago, and I read most of it, and it's just an amazing document. It's not something that I was ever exposed to until I met Colonel Barber. So here it says, this is in Proverbs chapter 8. Doth not wisdom cry, and understanding put forth her voice? She standeth in the top of high places, by the way in the places of the paths. She crieth at the gates, at the entry of the city, at the coming in at the door. Unto you, O men, I call, and my voice is to the sons of man. O ye simple, understand wisdom, and ye fools, be ye of an understanding heart. Hear, for I will speak of excellent things, and the opening of my lips shall be right things. For my mouth shall speak truth, and wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All of the words of my mouth are in righteousness. There is nothing froward or perverse in them. They are all plain to him that understandeth, and right to them that findeth knowledge. Receive my instruction, and not silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things that may be desired are not to be compared to it. In wisdom dwell with prudence, and find out knowledge of witty inventions. I love them that love me, and those that seek me early shall find me. Now, therefore, hearken unto me, O children, for blessed are they that keep my ways. Hear instruction, and be wise, and refuse it not. Blessed is the man that heareth me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at the posts of my doors. For whoso findeth me findeth life, and shall obtain favor of the Lord. But he that sinneth against me wrongeth his own soul. All they that hate me love death. Chapter 9. Wisdom hath builded her house. She hath hewn out her 7 pillars. She hath sent forth her maidens. She crieth upon the highest places of the city. Whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. As for him that wanteth understanding, she saith to him, Come eat my bread, and drink of the wine which I have mingled. Forsake the foolish and live, and go in the way of understanding. He that reproveth a scorner getteth to himself shame, and he that rebuketh a wicked man getteth himself a blot. Reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be yet wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. So that's pretty powerful, I think.
Written by Solomon, one of the wisest men that ever lived, was under the direction of God and the Holy Spirit.
That's pretty powerful.
That's right, yeah.
So that is our intention in this conversation, and to increase understanding of the problems in life that we're all facing and experiencing, and reconnect perhaps people with the solutions which are available,
Right, yeah.
but we have been cut off from.
And give people better health, better health, and they'll live a better life and won't have to pay out so much for medical bills.
Absolutely. We're tying all of these issues tying together. It becomes apparent as we went through the discussion and in our many years of looking into the problem. So that's what the whole project is about.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the next part of our conversation is about the cure. And JFK said, in a time of turbulence and change, knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oprah said, had I not had books and education in Mississippi, I would have believed that's all there was. And when you educate a woman, you set her free.
That's right, yeah.
So,
what a great lady
yeah,
Oprah is, yeah.
absolutely. So, with after all of our discussions, and we've come to the conclusion that world peace is within our grasp.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's pretty, maybe sort of a difficult to believe idea, but it is my belief that anybody who reads and tries to understand the problem from the perspective of the people that have been researching this and working on this issue for most of their lives, like Colonel Barber and the other experts that we have been exploring, it's my conclusion and Colonel Barber's belief and conclusion that world peace is definitely within our grasp. I would like to mention we actually go through a couple dozen books and the experts who have studied these problems, but I'll mention a few of the most important books that I've found on the subject. The first one is by James Gilligan, and it's called Preventing Violence, Prospects for Tomorrow. He's a professor at Harvard University. The next one is by Raymond B. Flannery. It's called Preventing Youth Violence. He's another expert doctor from Harvard. The next one is called Lost Boys by James Garbarino, PhD. He is at Cornell University. The next one is by Deborah Niehoff. She came from Johns Hopkins University. It's called The Biology of Violence. These are all the best books that I've found, the most important vital books, which are not very well known, but they all are, their understanding that they explain about the causes of violence and the cure is very powerful, but also very powerful and very clear. Then the next one is by Dr. Charles Figley, and it's called Burnout in Families. It's another very important one. And then the last one, which is, in my opinion, the most important one and the most well-written. It's called Vital Lies, Simple Truths: The Psychology of Self-Deception by Daniel Goleman. He's a professor of psychology, or he was a professor of psychology at Harvard University, and he's pretty well known. This is it right here. So after reading all these books, I feel that anybody could have a very complete and in-depth understanding of these problems and what the cure is. And then the other very important book is the Bible, which we hope to get more into, we actually get more into in the series of conversations that we had.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what this is about is delivering solutions to the world which perhaps haven't been. So what we're hoping to do in this exploration is use the work of great leaders, great scientists,
Mm-hmm.
great doctors,
Right.
Educators.
Mm-hmm.
We both Colonel Barber and myself agree that, and we've lived by the philosophy of seeking knowledge and understanding and power and resources in anywhere it can be found.
That's right.
I think you've always been an incredible seeker, right?
Well, tried to be.
All right. So
I've learned from everybody. I learned something from everyone that I come in contact with.
that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hoping to pick up on that and expose the world to all of the same information, and so that people can get the value from it.
That's right. The thinking and writing from the great leading minds of America.
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So here's a bit of guidance that I've gotten from a great man, a great thinker. That is Stedman Graham. His book is You Can Make It Happen, a 9-step plan for success. Pretty powerful idea. You can make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So he says right here that goals must be well defined. When you set out on a trip, you don't generally say, sometime soon, I think I'll go a couple 100 miles to the northeast somewhere and get there when I get there. No, you set a specific destination and a specific time when you want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So the destination that Colonel Barber and I have been discussing and have committed together to is world peace.
Right.
And the date that we've picked is the year 2005.
At least. Mm-hmm.
I suggested to him about a year ago that that would be soon enough so that we could see it together.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many great leaders and educators that I think would want to join and participate in that, and that we want to bring on. Walt Disney said, "If you can dream it, you can do it."
Mm-hmm. What a great man.
Very great man.
Fantastic, yeah.
So that is another one of our founding principles for our team effort here. Dr. Robert Schuller has this to say: "Power thinking believes that every problem has a solution somewhere that can match it.
Mm-hmm.
Every mountain can be moved. It may not go away, but I may change my perspective of the mountain as an obstacle and begin to spot it as an opportunity. I can begin to see it as something that holds greater minerals waiting to be mined and exploited." And if my perception of the problem sees it diminished in its negative intensity, and if my new paradigm of the problem is shifted until it becomes a possibility, then indeed the mountain has moved in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
It moved from a negative to a positive, which is one reason why Jesus was teaching a profound truth when he said, "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move."
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Nothing will be impossible for you. Yes, power thinkers are problem facers, problem chasers, problem erasers.
Mm-hmm.
They literally welcome problems and turn them into possibilities.
Right.
Power thinking is not narrow-minded, it is broad-minded. It has learned to think big enough for God to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest job in the world is thinking bigger than you've ever thought before.
That's right, yeah. Mm-hmm. Seeing the big picture,
Mm-hmm.
as well as 1,000 little pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're working on.
That's right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So here Dr. Schuller goes on. He says, "You can do it even though everyone, including you, thinks it's impossible. Every single dream I've ever had was impossible when I first dreamed it. I learned this lesson: nothing is impossible."
With God. That's right, yeah.
If I get people smarter to help me, if I'm willing to share in the credit, if I get my ego out of the way, if I get organized to succeed. I've learned how to succeed, but not without strong help from good people.
That's right.
The story of my life is the right people with the right support who came along at the right time, but not unsolicited, but not unrecognized by me.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is impossible if I'm humble enough and smart enough to get the right people to help me.
Right, absolutely, yeah. Agreed.
So that's what we have in mind.
Okay.
Pulling together a team of the smartest people in the world
Mm-hmm.
who have been devoting their lives to these problems with sufficient funding and the needed avenues to get their information and their research out to the public.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
So here's one person who might be right for that team. This is several incredible quotes from Ted Turner. He said, "At CNN we are flying the flag of the United Nations because we hope, with our greater depth and our international coverage, to make possible a better understanding of how people from different nations can live and work, and so to bring together in brotherhood and kindness and peace the people of this nation and the world."
Mm-hmm.
Then he said, "I really think we have a responsibility because television news is so powerful not to make a lot of money, but to have influence in our communities. And our community, as I interpret it, is not just the local market or even our country, but the world in which we live. And many of our problems are global and can only be solved together. I'm talking about problems of the environment, of population, of nuclear weapons and proliferation, of chemical and biological weapons, not to mention the poverty that exists in the world, the homelessness, and the 100 million children that are abandoned in the world today.
Mm-hmm.
While the world continues to spend $1 trillion a year on armaments, enough money where even a half or a third of it, properly utilized, would provide decent health care and education, housing, food for everybody on earth that's living in abject poverty.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to change the way we're doing things if we are going to survive. That's the conclusion I've come to in studying the global situation very, very carefully, which I think, as a news person, we're sitting there with the information right at our fingertips, and we have to interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing a number of We believe that broadcasting has a responsibility, and maybe that's an old-fashioned notion, but serving the public means something to me. So that's some pretty great stuff.
Yep.
So that's the kind of attitude that we want to have as our founding principle on this project.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to close with a couple great quotes, and we hope that this short introduction will pique the viewer's interest enough to listen to the entire presentation. Let me reassert that it's an attempt, a first shot at pulling together the information that both of us have come across over the years.
Right.
And it's just a first step
Mm-hmm.
that we want to expand further. Some cannot loosen their own chains and can nonetheless redeem their friends. You must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame. How could you become new if you had not first become ashes?
Mm.